The opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Cable 14, its sponsors, or its shareholders, Cogeco Cable, Shaw Cable, and Source Cable Limited.
Hello, I'm Terry Cooke. You're watching Vital Signs Television, our inaugural show of the season, and I am thrilled to be here talking about the work of the Hamilton Community Foundation, our partners, the Hamilton Spectator, and some great neighborhood leaders who are involved in this unique partnership to create capacity in neighborhoods that are rebuilding, renewing, and I think recapturing a sense of possibility and potential. It's my real pleasure here in our first show of the season to have with us Pat Reid from the McQuesten neighborhood. Pat, good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
Mr. David Derbyshire, my very fast running buddy from the YMCA and community development worker who's done a ton of work over a lot of years in multiple neighborhoods here. David, welcome to the show.
Good to see you again, Terry.
And Steve Calverley from the South Sherman neighborhood. Steve, it's great to have you with us today.
Great to be here. Thank you, Terry.
I'm going to start with, as I was teasing you guys, the best looking of my guests today. Pat, it is terrific to have you here. You've had a great year.
We have, yeah.
You and I together greeted the Governor General
when
he came into your neighborhood, and we had such a spectacular full day that culminated later at Leona Station, but
right.
At a wonderful roundtable with him, with people who are doing good work in your neighborhood. And most recently, you did a presentation along with a number of other neighborhood leaders at a city council meeting. And I think it's fair to say that I've spent more time in that city council chamber over the years as a former elected official probably than most people. Not always the most inspiring debates happen there, and occasionally there are things that can be contentious. But that was a remarkable and special night. And I give full credit to the councilors for listening attentively and respectfully. But mostly we heard from a lot of neighborhood leaders who told an amazing tale. And you did that on behalf of your neighborhood, and I want you to talk about that experience and how it connected the work that's been going on for 7 or 8 years with the Community Foundation and other partners in McQuesten.
Okay. Well, it was a phenomenal experience, and the neighbors were pumped and were excited, and we were able to share the planning that we have done, and it has been a long process. And as you know, the process really started in 2002 and culminated with the plan that we presented to City Council. The major plan that we did took about 7 meetings and over several hundred people and residents to review the plan. And we revised it, and we came up with 5 goals and several objectives and action plans to meet those goals and objectives. And it was thanks to David Derbyshire, Suzanne Brown from the city, and Jocelyn Strutt as well, and the tireless efforts they did as well.
So talk to us just about some of the for instances. What are the things that the community has struggled with? What are the targets for improvement? And how over time do you think residents and local leaders are going to decide whether or not, in fact, we're continuing to make headway?
Well, I think some of the struggles that we've had, of course, has been image. And the press sort of likes to dominate the negative part of it, where we're looking at the positive aspects of our neighborhood, which is our people. And we've been struggling with food security problems. We've been problem with a high dropout rate with children. And we've had problems with security, of course, and unemployment. And we're a large city housing Hamilton area. There's a lot of inventory that's city housing in the neighborhood. And so we have a lot of challenges, but on the other hand, we have a lot of wonderful people who are really getting their voice now and starting to speak out, and then really ready to roll up their sleeves and get involved. And it's really exciting to see our neighbors that were not visible at all are now becoming visible and giving a voice and ready to do. And this is going to transform our neighborhood.
Gotta love that. Steve, I want to turn to you and ask, you to compare and contrast the experience in South Sherman, because demographically and economically it's different than McQuesten, but I think there are probably some similarities in terms of the process and the discussions that you've had, and I want you to talk about your direct involvement in voluntary leadership there. What's going on in South Sherman?
Well, I think for a comparison, I think the area that we're in has it's maybe a little bit more of a mixed neighborhood, and we're seeing a number of people, for example, now buying homes in the area who are moving from Oakville, Mississauga, Toronto, and recognizing that there's some amazing architecture still in excuse me, in Hamilton.
There sure is.
And in our area, there are quite a few really stately, beautiful homes, and so we're seeing that group of people. But there's also a large number of second-level care facilities. There are lodges, there are boarding houses, and there's a number of other more, I guess you'd say, intense areas. And so we have, I think, maybe a little bit more of a broader range of people in our neighborhood.
Yeah. So talk to me about the work that's going on in terms of community planning, the interaction historically with the Community Foundation and the more recent leadership of the Neighborhoods group at City Hall, and the coming together of a plan to take on some identifiable targets for improvement that you guys have been working on.
Yeah, the South Sherman Community Planning Team is a Hamilton Community Foundation hub, and it started about 4 years ago. And it was over that 4 years that we've collected quite a lot of information from the community. At barbecue events that we've had where we were soliciting input from residents. We also had a survey conducted by the McMaster School of Nursing through their Health in the Hubs program, where a couple of hundred residents were surveyed in quite some detail. And so we were collecting a lot of information from residents, but the neighborhood action plan process that we've gone through recently, and now have a compiled neighborhood action plan that really brought that information together. And so it was it really does represent what is on the minds of residents, what is of concern to the residents, and further has been prioritized by the residents in terms of what issues and what opportunities are most important, and so forth.
So, David, it seems to me that the description Steve's just has provided is kind of the quintessential capturing of what asset-based community development is. And I wonder if we can segue into what it is you do and how it is that as a community development worker over a long period of time, you see your role as a catalyst in having the voices of people across different neighborhoods heard in planning, decision-making, and resource allocation type decisions. Talk to us about what you do.
Okay, Terry, for the last 10 years, I've had the privilege of working in a number of neighborhoods across the city of Hamilton. McQuesten neighborhood, I first entered as a child, as a 2-year-old, and lived there until I was 12. But more recently, in 2002, we went into that neighborhood, and we, being the Hamilton Community Foundation, came into that neighborhood and really worked at it, engaging the residents that were there, engaging them, getting to know them based on their assets, who they were, what were their hopes, what were their dreams, and then working with them to really create a way to mobilize those assets to address some of the challenges. And so that same model we have used in a number of neighborhoods across the city, getting to know people based on their assets, their gifts, their strengths, bringing together other assets that exist within a community, be they service providers, places of worship, businesses, institutions, bringing all of those assets together and using them to address the challenges. So that same model was used in South Sherman, Crown Point, a number of neighborhoods, to really get to know the people, and use those assets to make the neighborhood a better place to live, work, and raise their families.
Let me build on that, because Pat, you mentioned the stigma associated with media coverage, and I want to be blunt that it's a double-edged sword. I happen to believe that the Spectator and its Code Red series did a real service to this community and has been internationally recognized because they told some hard truths about some challenges that public institutions hadn't dealt successfully with and had allowed to fester over many years. And that has forced us to have at times uncomfortable conversations about things like, why is there a 21-year life expectancy difference between affluent and more marginalized neighborhoods, and why is it that we have certain social indicators that like dropout rates that are so remarkably and fundamentally different from one neighborhood to another. And it does compel us to have those conversations. I understand and our vital signs report at the foundation very much is looking at how do we change trajectory for the better, and what are the hard truths that need to inform our decision making. So talk to me about the challenges and how at the neighborhood planning tables you managed to get beyond the challenge of health performance or educational performance and allow that to inform a positive discussion. Because I've been in enough meetings with you folks to know that there are often blunt conversations. There are also frequently disparate opinions about what needs to change. How do you work your way through that as a neighborhood and come to some consensus about where it is you want your partners to focus their energies and allocate their resources?
I think what we try to do on the planning team in McQuesten is to take, yes, this is a challenge, and what can we do to remedy that? What can we do? What assets do we have? What do we need to have to meet those challenges? Rather than wallowing in the negativity, but trying to flip it around and saying, okay, this is a problem, so what resources do we have to be able to challenge that and address that? And one was employment issues, and what we've done is we've got a job center started where we're having from Mohawk College Employment, Hamilton, and Wesley Urban Ministries staff coming in once a week. And addressing the needs and inviting people to come in and use the computers to do job searches and so on. Another aspect, of course, has been food security problems, and we addressed those needs in various ways. One was the grocery shuttle, another one has been in the community garden, and now we're doing community kitchens at 2 different locations, and it's looking at, okay, so this is a problem. How can we remedy that without wallowing in it? It's flipping it over the other side and say, okay, I can do this, you can do that, and let's work together. And that's how I think that we build a fairly good positive approach to it.
And Terry, if I may, another thing that we're able to do is to form collaborations, partnerships with other service providers, agencies across the city, inviting them to bring their assets to the table and use them when we problem solve. And oftentimes it's the hidden assets that exist at the table that come to the forefront and help develop the strategies to address the challenges. It's not always people doing the usually expected things. People recognize that they have connections and relationships that they can bring to the problem-solving table and come up with strategies and solutions that far exceed what we thought was possible before we sat down with all of the people at the table.
Excellent point. I'm going to take a quick break here. I'm Terry Cooke, the Hamilton Community Foundation. You're listening to our Vital Signs show with Steve Calverley from the South Sherman neighborhood, David Derbyshire, and Pat Reid from McQuesten. We will be right back after this quick commercial break. I'm Terry Cooke from the Hamilton Community Foundation. We're back on Vital Signs. This is our first show of the year, and we have a great panel. Pat Reid from the McQuesten neighborhood, David Derbyshire, the ubiquitous. He's in all the neighborhoods all the time doing great stuff. And Steve Calverley from the South Sherman neighborhood. I want to come back to you, Steve, because you talked earlier about the challenge in inner city neighborhoods where we frankly have made some poor planning decisions and put too much pressure on neighborhoods. And of course, there's been a great controversy recently about the Charlton Hall expansion plans, which puts a focus on the needs of a particular group of young women in an outstanding organization, but doesn't necessarily step back to say, how do we create healthy neighborhoods throughout the region? How do we make sure that we're providing opportunities for people from all income stratas and with all levels of ability or disability to be accommodated in all neighborhoods so that we have a healthy balance? And I know it's something you've struggled with. I spent some time this summer. I took a learning group from the city manager and the director of education and school board chair and spectator education reporter to Raleigh, North Carolina and Montgomery County, Maryland, where in both cases they've done some very innovative things to create a healthier income balance in schools and neighborhoods. And I'm interested in hearing your thoughts about how we move from a situation in which there's a sense of despair and hopelessness to connecting the dots around good public policy that strengthens all of our neighborhoods.
Well, that's one of the things that's often on my mind, and I think the best way that I can describe a vision that I think is a healthy one is that we need to have healthy mixed neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. And we chose, my wife and my daughter and I chose to move to Hamilton 4 years ago. We lived in a small town about 30 minutes out of the city, mm-hmm. and we found ourselves regularly coming into Hamilton for different things that we were involved in. And at the time that we were looking for our home, our realtor said to us, there is a lodge right next door to mm-hmm. the house that you're looking at. Yep. Is that a problem? And we said, no, it's not a problem at all, because we were intentionally moving to what we knew would be a mixed neighborhood, mm-hmm. and we wanted to be fully a part of a true
urban experience.
Mixed neighborhood, right? Mm-hmm. An urban experience. That's right. Yep. And so we did purchase that home. We've lived there for now moving on toward 5 years, and we've developed friendships, relationships with all of the residents at that second level care facility or lodge, and we have great neighbors. They're wonderful neighbors. We're all on first name basis, and I think that I hope that they would say that their lives are richer for our friendship. I know that certainly our lives are richer mm-hmm. for the friendship that we enjoy from them, and that's just one example. There are other examples, and I could talk on and give more examples, but I think that's enough. But that's where I think we need to go, is to build these healthy mixed right. neighborhoods, and to get to a place that is healthy. I think that we have to be more intentional mm-hmm. about perhaps what the mix is, so that these neighborhoods can be great places for everyone who is there.
Yeah, one of the leaders that we met with in the U.S. was a fellow named David Rusk, who's written extensively about the urban experience and turnaround cities and turnaround neighborhoods in America. And I often say that if you look at our demographics as an old industrial town, we resemble places like Buffalo and Cleveland and Pittsburgh a lot more than we do most other Canadian cities. But one of David Rusk's key findings over 40 years is that money and community-based community development and active neighborhoods can take you so far, but then you need healthy planning policies that in fact spread the assets, the resources, and frankly the challenges more equitably between and across neighborhoods. And I think there's got to be a marrying of what he calls the inside game, which is the stuff we're talking about, and the outside game, which is broader public policies that make sure that all of our communities and all of our neighborhood have a fair chance of success. And on the educational piece, similarly, you can't place all of the kids with low incomes and high challenges in the same schools and expect teachers to teach their way out of concentrated poverty. The experience is quite the opposite, that what we need to start with is a healthier balance and the appropriate allocation of resources. So, David, I'm curious, because you spent a lot of your time at the intersection between good grassroots neighborhood planning and discussion and then trying to connect the dots and get institutions, governments, school boards, foundations to do the right thing and to honor those grassroots built plans. Talk to me about how you lever all of that good consensus building and try to create an atmosphere that ends with action.
Well, Terry, I think one of our challenges is to bring people in and to experience the people, the resources, the assets that exist in the neighborhoods. And as they become involved, they start to discover that, yes, the community has voice and choice, and that they're able to articulate their challenges, they're able to mobilize their assets, and they can bring some things to the conversational table that will greatly benefit the organization, the institution. A classic example of that is the McMaster School of Nursing. Over the last 4 years, they have become tremendously involved in the community. And when we invite organizations into the community, we don't want them to come in with the answer.
Right.
We want them to come in and listen and have questions and listen to the answers that the community has, and then find a way for them to bring their assets. So the School of Nursing has been very helpful over the last 4 years in listening to where a community is, then wondering with the community, you know, these are our assets, how can they benefit? Would this be helpful if we did this? And taking a servant leader approach of really listening. And to me, that's one of the critical elements. If we're bringing resources into the community, that we invite them to listen to the community, to learn from the community.
Great softball lob for my next question to Pat, which is, you have a great experience in McQuesten of having the now city manager, Chris Murray, come in there when he was the new director of Hamilton Housing, and meeting with some residents who weren't entirely enthralled with the performance of the city around a bunch of things. And I think having a sobering wake-up call about what it was that people really wanted from the big institution and what he came in expecting that they might have wanted. Can you talk to us a little bit about that educational experience for our city manager?
Well, I think it was a bit of a wake-up call as well, because he had preconceived ideas of what was needed, and he all of a sudden is hearing something really different. And the thing that kudos to Chris Murray is that he listened. And he heard, yes, we want more lighting, we want it safer in the neighborhood, cut some of the trees so we can see, put in different things in here so that we feel secure and safe, and so that we can have things happen for that's safe for our neighborhood, day and night.
Yep.
And I really give him a lot of kudos for that, because he really did listen, and he pushed his sleeves up and did it. It wasn't like giving lip service to something. He was right there in the planning stage with the neighbors.
And I happen to think that experience for Chris Murray, that building upon the grassroots neighborhood work that was being done in your neighborhood and a number of the others where the Community Foundation were involved, when in fact became the inspiration for the broader neighborhoods plan and the recruitment of Paul Johnson from Wesley to in fact build some infrastructure into the city manager's office that now is opening the door to a much greater level of collaboration across city departments and across other major institutions. I think the question, and I come back to Steve in that sense of hope as opposed to hopelessness, is where do we go next, and how will we know if we're sustaining progress and starting to see measurable impact on a day-to-day basis? And we're down to about our last 3 minutes, so as much as the open-ended conversation is something I really enjoy, I'll ask you to focus on the things that you'll be watching for in South Sherman and then across the city, and I'll finish with you, Pat, to tell me how we'll know a year, 5 years, or 10 years from now that in fact we're moving the yardsticks.
Okay, well, I think the short answer is resident engagement. When we see more residents engaged because they're moving from a sense of, as you just mentioned, a sense of perhaps hopelessness in the neighborhood to a sense of hope and wanting to be part of the change. And then more specifically, it will be the specific actions that we have identified in our neighborhood action plan, which we will be tracking to and measuring and seeing these come about.
So great that we got a conceptual plan, great that we're talking about it. The proof will be in the pudding.
Yes.
Terrific. How will we know?
A great harbinger of hope, I think, is the, again, a commitment.
That's easy for you to say.
Yes, yes. The Community Foundation, again, has taken the lead on, and that for me is the Neighborhood Leadership Institute. The support and commitment to helping increase the capacity of the resident leadership in our neighborhoods. We're bringing together resident leaders from across the neighborhoods and helping them develop their leadership capacities so that the actions that are coming out of the neighborhood plans will have an engaged, committed group of resident leaders who can help move that yardstick forward.
Terrific. And Pat, the last word, as always, goes to you.
Yeah.
How will we know that it's more than lip service?
I think we'll know by the amount of resident engagement and the transformation that is taking place and will take place. As more and more residents see that their voices can be heard, that it can be, that they can change what they don't like, then you'll see more and more people coming on board. We're seeing it now with many new people coming aboard, and I can see more and more in the future coming on board.
Fantastic. Look, we're out of time. It's been an extraordinarily compact and interesting discussion. I want to thank my guests today. Pat Reid from McQuesten, David Derbyshire from everywhere in the Hammer, and Steve Calverley from South Sherman. Really appreciate the work that you continue to do. I'm Terry Cooke of the Hamilton Community Foundation. You've been watching Vital Signs. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, and we look forward to being with you again next month. Take care. That's all for now.